the Prime Minister on those comments about the tragic events of just a few weeks ago. Mr. Speaker, can I also begin by paying tribute to John Hume, who passed away during recess. John was a beacon of light in the most troubled of times. He'll be seriously missed. Mr. Speaker, let me start today with the exams fiasco. On the day that thousands of young people had their A-level grades downgraded, the Prime Minister said, and I quote him, "The exam results are robust. They're good, they're dependable." The Education Secretary said there would absolutely not be a U-turn. A few days later, a U-turn. We learned yesterday that the Education Secretary knew well in advance that there was a problem with the algorithm. So a straight answer to a straight question, please, Prime Minister. When did the Prime Minister first know that there was a problem with the algorithm?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, perhaps I could begin by congratulating the right honourable gentleman on his birthday and say to him that on the exams and the stress that young people have been through over the summer, both the Secretary of State for Education and I understand very well how difficult it has been for them and for their families going through a pandemic at a time when we have not been able, because of that pandemic, in common with most other countries in the world, to stage normal examinations. And as a result of what we learned about the tests, the results that had come in, we did institute a change. We did act. The students, the pupils of this country, now do have their grades. And I really ask the right honourable gentleman whether he will join me in congratulating those pupils on their hard work and whether he agrees with me that they deserve the grades they've got.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I've already expressed congratulations to all those students, and I do so again. But I want to go back to my question, which the Prime Minister avoided. And I know why he avoided it. Because he either knew of the problem with the algorithm and did nothing, or he didn't know when he should have. So let me ask again, when did the Prime Minister first know there would be a problem with the algorithm?
Mr. Speaker, as you know perfectly well, Ofqual made it absolutely clear time and again that in their view the system that was in place was robust. Ofqual is, as he knows, an independent organisation, and credit had to be given to their views. All summer long, Mr. Speaker, he's been going around undermining confidence, spreading doubts, and in particular about the return to school in safe conditions. And it's absolutely true. And today is a great day because the parents, the pupils of this country, the teachers of this country are overwhelmingly proving him wrong and proving the doubters wrong, Mr. Speaker, because they are going back to school in record numbers in spite of all the gloom and dubitation that he tried to spread. And I think it would be a fine thing, Mr. Speaker, if today, after 3 months of refusing to do so, as pupils go back to school, if today finally he said that school was safe to go back to. Come on.
Keir Starmer.
The Prime Minister is just tin-eared and making it up as he goes along. I'm surprised. The Education Secretary stood at that dispatch box yesterday and said and acknowledged that Labour's first priority has been getting children back to school. That's been our first priority. I've said it numerous times in this dispatch box. He knows it very well. He's just playing games. Mr. Speaker, and he's fooling nobody. Even his own MPs have run out of patience. The Vice Chair of the 22 Committee, the MP for Broxbourne, has said the government says one thing on Monday, changes its mind on Tuesday, something different is presented on Wednesday. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? Another of his MPs, who wisely wants to remain anonymous, perhaps in the chamber today, he or she said, I am speaking for you because this is what was said, it's mess after mess. His own MPs, U-turn after U-turn. It's a fundamental issue of competence. God knows what's going on. There's no grip. His own MPs are right, aren't they?
Mr. Speaker, this is a leader of the opposition who backed remaining in the EU and now is totally silent on the side. Now has performed a U-turn. He backed, and perhaps he still does, Mr. Speaker. This is a leader of the opposition who supported an IRA condoning politician who wanted to get out of NATO and now says absolutely nothing. This is a leader of the opposition who sat on the front bench whilst there was anti-Semitism.
I think there are questions being asked. We do need to try and answer the questions that's being put to the Prime Minister. It will be helpful to those who are watching to know the answers. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think it will be helpful to all those who are watching to know.
Prime Minister, I think I'll make the decisions today. Come on, Prime Minister.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, if I may say, I think it will be helpful to all those who are watching to know that this opposition and this leader of the opposition said absolutely nothing to oppose the method of examinations that was proposed, and indeed they opposed the teacher accreditation system that we eventually came up with. Is he now saying that those grades aren't right, or is it just Captain Hindsight leaping on a bandwagon and opposing a policy that he supported 2 weeks ago?
Keir Starmer.
The problem is he's governing in hindsight. That's why he's making so many mistakes. Mr. Speaker, before I go on, the Prime Minister said something about the IRA, and I want him to take it back. I worked in Northern Ireland for 5 years with the police service of Northern Ireland, bringing peace. I prosecuted the Director of Public Prosecution, serious terrorists, for 5 years, working with the intelligence and security forces and with the police in Northern Ireland. Ask the Prime Minister to have the decency to withdraw that comment. Mr. Prime Minister, it's the same every time. Pretend the problem doesn't exist, brush away scrutiny, make the wrong decision, then blame somebody else. This has got to change, because the next major decision for the Prime Minister is on the furlough scheme. The jobs of millions of people are at risk. The longer he delays, the more they're at risk. So will he act now, finally get this decision right, and commit to extend the furlough for those sectors and those workers that desperately need it?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what we are doing in this government is getting people back to school, getting our pupils back to school in spite of all the doubts that he's tried to sow, and we are getting people back to work. What he wants to do is extend the furlough scheme, on which this country has already spent £40 billion. What we would rather do is get people into work through our Kickstart scheme, which we are launching today, £2 billion to spend to support people, young people in particular, to get the jobs that they need. He wants to keep people out of work in suspended animation. We want to move this country forward. That's the difference between him and us.
Can I just say there was a question about the allegation and all that? I was very concerned that was the point I was making. I think, in fairness, I'm sure you would like to withdraw.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm very happy to say that I think that I listened to the protestations of the Right Honourable Gentleman. I think they would have been more in order throughout the long years in which he supported a leader of the Labour Party.
Leave it as it was. Yes.
When the Prime Minister has worked with the security and intelligence forces prosecuting criminals and terrorists, he can lecture me. I asked him to do the decent thing, but doing the decent thing and this Prime Minister don't go together. This has been a wasted summer. The government should have spent it preparing for the autumn and winter. Instead, they've lurched from crisis to crisis, U-turn to U-turn. To correct one error, even two might make sense. But when the government's notched up 12 U-turns and rising, the only conclusion is serial incompetence. That serial incompetence is holding Britain back. Will the Prime Minister take responsibility and finally get a grip?
Mr. Speaker, I take full responsibility for everything that has happened under this government throughout my period in office. And actually what has happened so far is that we have succeeded in turning the tide of this pandemic. And in spite of the negativity and the constant sniping from the opposition, we are seeing a country that is not only going back to school, but going back to work. Britain is in the lead in developing vaccines. We are in the lead in finding cures for this disease, in dexamethasone, in finding treatments for this disease. And not only that, Mr. Speaker, we are taking this country forward in spite of the extreme difficulties that we face. What I think the people of this country would appreciate is he and I, the Labour front bench, everybody across this House, coming together and uniting and saying that it is safe for kids to get back to school. And I must say, Mr. Speaker, we still have not heard those words from the Right Honourable Gentleman. Will he now say school is safe?
I've said it so many times. School is safe. My own children have been in school throughout. There's no issue on this. The Prime Minister is seeking to divide instead of... I wrote to him on the 18th of May, in confidence and in private, offering my support to him to get kids back to school. The only reason they weren't back before the summer was because of his incompetent Education Secretary. Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister will recall that before the recess, I asked him if he would meet the COVID-19 Bereaved Families for Justice group. I had the privilege of meeting the families on the 15th of July. They gave me incredibly moving accounts of how COVID-19 had taken their loved ones from them. On Sky News last week, the Prime Minister was asked if he would meet the families. And he said, and I'll quote, "Of course I will meet the bereaved. Of course I will do that." But yesterday, they received a letter from the Prime Minister saying that meeting them was now, regrettably, not possible. The Prime Minister will understand the frustration and the hurt of those families that he said one thing to camera and another to them. Can I urge the Prime Minister to reconsider, to do the right thing and find time to meet these grieving families?
Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, if I may say to the right honourable gentleman, it's absolutely typical of him that he should frame it in that way, because when I made that answer, of course I was very happy to meet the families of the bereaved, and I sympathise deeply with all those who have lost loved ones throughout this pandemic, and we all feel their pain and their grief. But it turns out that this particular group that he refers to are currently in litigation against the government, and I will certainly meet them once that litigation is concluded. But I may say to him, it would be a better thing, rather than trying to score points in that way, if he joined together with us and with this government and said not only is school safe, but it is also safe to go back to. And by the way, Mr Speaker, that's the first time in 4 months he said it. As I'm delighted to have extracted it from him over this dispatch box. He's never said it to me in the House of Commons. I hope, Mr Speaker, he will also say that it is safe for the workforce of this country to go back to work in a COVID-secure way. We want to take this country forward. We're not only getting the pandemic under control, with deaths down, with hospital admissions way, way down. We will continue to tackle it with local lockdowns, with our superlative test and trace system, which, by the way, before they sneer and before they mock at it, Mr Speaker, has now conducted more tests than any other country in Europe. And he might hail that rather than sneering at this country's achievements.
Jones.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Discussions